All right. Well, welcome everyone. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're located. I'm Ron Burke, CEO at the Alliance for Water Efficiency. Really happy to be co-hosting this webinar today with the Water and Planning Network. Today we'll be talking about opportunities for realizing water reuse and affordable housing. Next slide, please. I think by now we're all pretty familiar with the rules and codes of conduct for these online webinars, but I'll go over some of those rules real quickly. First off, this is going to be 60 minutes in length. There will be time for questions at the end. Please feel free to put your questions or comments into the chat, and we will tackle those at the end. We will have time to do that for sure. Audio is through your telephone or your computer microphone and speakers. Your phone line will be muted during the presentation because we are recording the webinar, which will be available within a few days after the webinar is completed. And again, questions can be typed in throughout the webinar and answered at the end by our speakers. Next slide, please. For those of you unfamiliar with the Alliance for Water Efficiency, I'm guessing many of you are familiar, and hopefully you're members of AWE, and if not, there's a link at the bottom for you to learn more about us and membership. We have more than 530 organizational members. We're a unique network of water efficiency experts and practitioners who work for water utilities, corporations, consulting firms, government agencies, and so forth. We really are where these experts come together to collaborate, develop tools, research, and to network towards doing their jobs better and ultimately advancing water efficiency across North America. So if you're not a member, we hope you'll consider becoming one. All right, I'm now going to turn it over to Bill Sasnick, who's the co-chair of the Water and Planning Network, to kick off the webinar and introduce our speakers. Bill.
Thank you, Ron. I'm Bill Sasnick. I'm the co-chair of the American Planning Association's Water and Planning Network. I wanted to start off by thanking the Alliance for Water Efficiency and Ron and company for their continued partnership and helping us to host these webinars. We hope you find this useful. Just by way of background, the APA Water and Planning Network is an interest group within APA. And our focus is water and land use and the connections between them. And it is a network of water and land use professionals. You don't need to be an APA or AWRA or any other professional society to join. We have almost 500 members at present, and we have monthly newsletters and webinars like this. We host about 4 or so of these a year. And if you want to join, you can see on the screen an email address that will go to myself and Marianne Dickinson, who is the other co-chair of the Water and Planning Network. And you can also follow us on Twitter. So if you're interested in the intersection of water planning and land use planning, we are a great place to check out. So next, I'd like to introduce our speakers today. We have Jennifer Walker, who we welcome back. She has made a number of appearances as part of our webinar series. She's the Deputy Director of the National Wildlife Federation's Texas Coast and Water Program. Jennifer has nearly 2 decades of experience focusing on water policy and resource issues in Texas, with an emphasis on water planning, water conservation, and bay and estuary protection. She serves on the Water Conservation Advisory Council of Texas. She's chair of the Austin's Water Forward Task Force. She also serves on the board of directors of the Alliance for Water Efficiency and the Colorado River Alliance. She's busy. Jennifer has a Bachelor of Science degree in Ecology, Evolution, and Conservation Biology from the University of Texas at Austin. We also have as a speaker today, Jonathan Sifelt. He is the Senior Communications Manager of the National Wildlife Federation's Texas Coast and Water Program. Jonathan has over a decade of experience in environmental research and communications, and he's published on the history of large-scale water infrastructure in semi-arid environments, with a particular focus on the long-term impacts of climate infrastructure projects. Jonathan has a PhD in environmental history from the University of Texas at Austin. And with that, I'm going to turn it off to our principal speaker, Jennifer. Take it away, Jen.
Great, thanks a lot. Thank you all for joining us today. I want to thank Bill and Marianne for really convening the Water Planning Network and sending all the great information you do. It's a wonderful group of folks, so I enjoy being able to present to you all. I want to thank the network and the Alliance for hosting this webinar and giving us the opportunity to share our work. Liam, can you forward it to the next slide, please? I need to remember to ask you to do that. So we released our report, Opportunities for Realizing Water Reuse and Affordable Housing, back in May. And we're going to give you an overview of the report and our findings today. And I encourage you all to take a look at it. Please share it far and wide with your colleagues. And also, we're really interested in your feedback or opportunities for collaboration. Feel free to reach out to Jonathan and myself if we didn't answer all your questions, or if we missed some important piece of making this all work. Feel free to reach out to us. Next slide. So the idea for this project originally resulted from the City of Austin's approval, which I'm based in Austin, their approval last year of a new set of water reuse ordinances. One of these requires Austin's large commercial developments to offset their non-potable water use with water generated on site through methods such as AC condensate capture, rainwater harvesting, gray water reuse, and even hooking up to the centralized reuse system. Although we're really excited about this program, questions about affordable housing impacts arose. Austin, like many cities, has an affordable housing crisis. I guess you could call it a crisis, really. And our decision makers and community want to make sure that we do not put into place policies that undermine housing affordability. So while this requirement that was adopted last year is in the voluntary phase right now, before the ordinance becomes mandatory late next year, the city will be performing an affordability impact statement. This is an effort to inform local decision makers. The affordability impact statement is really looking to say, are any of the actions that our city council are taking, will they impact housing affordability? So we, in anticipation of that, really wanted to take a close look at that process. We wanted to inform decision makers and stakeholders about water reuse and housing and the nexus between the two and how we can really look at it as a community. And we wanted to understand if we should push this technology for affordable housing, which is included under this requirement at this time, and would there be unintended consequences? So while we began this project in response to a particular activity, we also think that these questions have broader implications beyond Austin. As more cities incorporate water planning or water resilience strategies in response to water stress, equity needs to be at the forefront. Access to resilient and affordable housing is an equity issue, and we think that on-site reuse can help deliver on both of these. Additionally, this topic also addresses the very real link between housing development and water supply. Most cities are facing an affordable housing crisis, which is further complicated by community and regional concerns over climate, water supply, and costs, especially in Western states. On-site reuse can help align water and housing planning goals and ensure that affordability isn't lost in the mix. Next slide, Liam. So like I said, while we originally started this project with some different goals in mind, one of the things we also wanted to do was to quantify affordability impacts and savings from putting in place on-site reuse requirements. Our goal was to provide a quantitative data for the affordability impact statement that would be needed. However, we quickly found that this data wasn't actually available or not readily available. So we pivoted to a more qualitative and exploratory approach based on the information that we could gather. So we mainly focused on this for this report on subsidized affordable housing projects. However, many of these benefits and opportunities can be applied to non-subsidized housing that is also affordable. Subsidized housing is funded through government programs that reduce rents and sometimes cover other housing costs for low and middle income households. Depending on the model, they will have a certain percentage of income restricted units depending on the median area income. So our first step was to look at existing literature and see what's out there. We discovered that there's little work or research on affordable housing and on-site water reuse. However, work on green building and affordable housing included some information on water reuse as well. So we then set up interviews with stakeholders experienced with affordable housing and on-site water reuse. We asked questions about the challenges they faced, funding sources, and lessons learned. We spoke with a lot of organizations. A few examples are Hope Communities, a nonprofit organization with ties in Minneapolis, which helped develop the Rose, which is one of the developments that we have a case study for. We also spoke with Asakura Robinson, a local planning and landscape architecture firm that has experience with sustainable design and equity. These organizations shared their perspective and experience with us, and we used what we learned to inform this project. In our next slides, we're going to go over the benefits of this approach, outline the potential barriers, and present the numerous opportunities and recommendations to support the application of this technology in affordable housing. We also developed case studies for affordable housing projects that integrate reuse strategies at various scales to showcase what is possible. So as with any new program, we want to focus on the benefits, and so I'm going to go over a couple of those. There are many benefits to be gained through committing to on-site reuse in a community. We found that when approached creatively and with an expanded mindset, that it's easy to identify multiple benefits from the development and use of on-site water reuse systems. In many cases, we considered pairing reuse with green infrastructure to maximize results. This approach was influenced by the Pacific Institute's excellent publication on the multi-benefit framework. And this really focused on identifying multiple benefits and stacked incentives to promote alternative water strategies. So, and identifying and focusing on multiple benefits can help illustrate the wide impact that reuse can have. It identifies all factors that can be included in a holistic long-term cost-benefit analysis, which is really a key issue here. And it can assist in identifying stakeholders who may be interested in partnering. That goes back to the stacked benefits. For example, in Austin, we've identified programs where multiple city departments participate in providing incentives when normally it would just be, let's say, like the water department or forestry or watershed protection. If you can find the multiple benefits of a different strategy, you can combine incentives. So the benefits that we focused on are organized under three categories: the financial, environmental, and social. The financial benefits can be directly felt by end users through a reduction of utility costs or development fees. The benefits to water utilities, the financial benefits, can come from diverting water supply or water treatment investment. The environmental benefits are maximized when embedding green infrastructure into on-site reuse systems. For example, including a green roof or bioswales or rain gardens can abate impacts of local heat and stormwater runoff. And the social benefits can require more intentional programming by property management. Social benefits include environmental education on water use, access to multifunctional green spaces, which can therefore improve mental and physical health and provide opportunities for outdoor recreation. These are just a few examples and they're not exhaustive. Can you go to the next slide, Liam? All right, so we have in our report on page 10, we've got this really great table that we've developed. These benefits were sourced. These benefits that we list here are all sourced through the case studies that we gathered and based on existing literature, and we reference them all. I really like this chart because it focuses on the multiple benefits as well as the multiple beneficiaries. For example, installing green infrastructure can reduce flooding and improve water quality. This is an environmental and economic benefit that trickles down to the community, property developers, and property owners. So next, I'm going to pass it on to Jonathan so he can talk about barriers and opportunities as well as a few of our case studies.
Thanks, Jennifer. Good morning, everyone. So a big part of this project involved a wide-ranging set of interviews with various stakeholders. And from those interviews, we gathered a whole set of challenges that stakeholders are facing in terms of integrating water reuse into existing or new affordable housing projects. And those barriers we felt kind of fell into three main categories. That's regulatory, financial, and training barriers. And really, those first two, the regulatory and financial, seem to have a lot of people's attention. So in terms of the regulatory barriers that were discussed in our interviews with stakeholders, they were really wide-ranging depending on local ordinances and the type of funding pursued. But the main theme we encountered is really the amount of time added to projects because of various regulations. Affordable housing projects are on strict and tight deadlines already, and adding reuse with its accompanying potential regulations really can throw a spanner in the works. So really the primary regulatory issue is bringing additional permitting to a project. If developers are doing reuse for the first time, they are likely unfamiliar with regulatory requirements tied to reuse, and that can take some time to just research and uncover what they need to do in terms of regulations. So maneuvering through both the regulatory hurdles and the funding options for additional green features adds additional time and planning to a schedule that's already very tight for developers. So usually we found that additional green measures at the moment are typically kept simple and based on past experience, primarily just in the interests of keeping projects on a tight schedule. In terms of financial barriers, the main financial concern was, of course, the upfront costs of on-site water reuse systems. We heard concerns echoed by Austin City Council and developers, and we heard those kinds of concerns with upfront costs echoed across our interviews. And there were some key questions stakeholders had, like, do the additional costs of upfront costs of on-site water reuse prohibit the number or limit the number of affordable units that can be included in a project, or do they allow for any affordable units at all? And then also, are there gentrification effects from these kinds of investments? And then in terms of training barriers, there was typically little or minimal knowledge of reuse systems in this community of developers and affordable housing advocates. Particularly, there's a lack of training in terms of benefits and costs and management. So both in the design and construction process and in terms of ongoing management and operations, there's a lack of training. We also added in our report a concern over the lack of public awareness of on-site water reuse. We feel this leads to underdeveloped public support, i.e. there could be much more if people were aware of the benefits of on-site reuse. We could have much more public and community support for key initiatives. If we could go to the next slide. Many of these findings have also been noted in other studies looking at the wider barriers facing on-site water reuse systems in general. But when we look at affordable housing in particular, some of these issues just become particularly acute. And we've included in our report this table that outlines some specific issues and specific steps we think that can be taken to address them. So if we could move to the next slide, we're going to just look at a couple of these opportunities and recommendations in detail. I love this picture. This is a picture of a site in Austin, Foundation Communities, an affordable housing developer in the Austin area. This is one of their new projects up in Northwest Austin. And this building is a multiple use site. I think it's called the Learning Center. You can see in the picture the two rainwater harvesting tanks they have, and those capture rainwater, and that water is used in this building. They are one of the case studies we look at in this report. Okay, so if we go to the next slide, please. So in terms of opportunities and recommendations to overcome some of these barriers, in terms of the concerns with upfront costs, there are various funding opportunities that already exist that can be used for these sorts of projects. And we try to dive into detail in this report and into how some of these, some particular initiatives, both federal and more state-based funding initiatives, can be used for water reuse. So for example, PACE financing provides a mechanism. It's available in many states. It provides a mechanism for covering the upfront costs of water reuse in a building development. We have a separate report out that uses Texas as a case study for how and when PACE financing makes sense for water reuse specifically. And there's a link in the slide there to that report. We're happy to talk about that more in the question and answer time. In addition to PACE, both FEMA and HUD have programs that address housing and water resiliency that include water reuse systems. And so our report provides recommendations for how you can access those funds for an affordable housing project that would incorporate water reuse. If we could move to the next slide. Then moving to the concerns over displacement and gentrification, we advocate for some anti-displacement strategies. These strategies are important to consider alongside any water infrastructure investment as proactive measures against unintended consequences. So I will note that at the moment, there are a few studies that have investigated a link between climate resilient affordable housing and gentrification. So that link is not necessarily established in the literature yet. There is a clear link right now in a certain set of studies between luxury apartments with green infrastructure and gentrification. But it's important to note there's not necessarily a clear-cut tie between climate resilient affordable housing and displacement. Nevertheless, it's still, we feel it's still important to outline strategies to counteract possible displacement. And so the strategies we focused on are really three-pronged. One of them is community-based work led primarily by community organizations, just to ensure that local needs are understood and met and can inform the design of water features in a project. We also think that on the city level, anti-displacement policies that proactively prevent displacement and gentrification are a critical factor to consider, and we outline some specific policies cities can think about in terms of anti-displacement. And then finally, building up a local workforce familiar with reuse is also key for the sustainability and equity of on-site reuse systems. Equity-centered practices like these can ensure BIPOC and low-income households receive real, tangible, material, long-term benefits from these kinds of projects. If we could go to the next slide, please. In terms of reducing regulatory barriers, we've identified how cities and local governments can prioritize setting clear permitting pathways for on-site reuse systems that can assist in reducing time and cost barriers for developers. So this provides developers clearer pathways with less fees. And we just need to make sure that we can make the walk through this process as clear and barrier-free as possible to incentivize developers to go down this path. If we can go to the next slide. Another critical recommendation we have in terms of overcoming financial barriers is integrating One Water criteria explicitly in funding criteria. At the moment, the features that are typically included in funding incentives are typically tied to efficiency measures. So increasing the importance of reuse systems in funding incentives can really push developers to integrate them. And here, really, the low-income housing tax credits are probably the best opportunity since they are the main source of funding for affordable housing, and developers are really used to the process of accessing them. So at the moment, these are allocated using qualified action plans, which do include sustainability criteria. However, only 15 states at the moment include water conservation amongst those qualified action plan sustainability criteria, and none of them incentivize water reuse strategies. So this is really a key potential area to leverage and better incentivize water reuse. Next slide, please. Finally, a little bit bigger picture, we really need to develop a cost-benefit analysis that includes long-term water savings, impacts of climate change, and the multiple benefits of reuse. So in our report, we turn to the multiple benefits framework that Jennifer mentioned and the life cycle cost framework as examples of ways to broaden existing cost-benefit analysis. This is particularly important in affordable housing where the upfront costs can really make or break a project since they are bound by the below market rate rents that they charge. So upfront costs are really crucial to consider in an affordable housing project. So if we can broaden the cost benefit analysis frameworks that are used for these projects and show affordable housing owners and developers a long-term perspective in terms of the cost benefits, hopefully that can incentivize their interest in developing on-site water reuse components into their projects. And finally, next slide. I just wanted to highlight the report does walk through a whole bunch of case studies of existing projects that have integrated water reuse in various ways into affordable housing development. If you can go to the next slide. One of the projects we highlight frequently in the report is quite a famous one in New York City, Via Verde. This is a complex that consists of a 20-story tower and a mid-rise building with duplex apartments and townhouses. The project includes retail space and community space, both that make use of innovative water management. Really, the centerpiece of this project, the crown jewel, is its green roof. It's a 40,000 square foot green roof that harvests rainwater, but also acts as a community space and amenity for residents. So it provides green walking space, fresh produce, and the mitigation aspect of these green infrastructure projects is really something that's increasingly critical. As we know across much of the country this summer, urban heat is becoming a major issue planners are having to consider, and heat mitigation is a major benefit of some of these green infrastructure projects tied to water reuse. If we can go to the next slide, just briefly, the other case study I wanted to highlight was the Rose in Minneapolis. This is built atop a former brownfield site that was long associated with urban blight. It's now a 90-unit mixed income apartment complex that uses quite a range of on-site water reuse and other green building approaches. And we really wanted to highlight it because it's a shining example of community engagement. There was an extensive community engagement process involved in the initial planning stage of this project. And because of that community engagement, sustainability and gentrification appeared as major concerns for the community. And so the project was developed with the sustainability and anti-displacement policies in effect. Yeah, and I think I'm going to hand it off to Jennifer now just to talk about where we are headed in terms of future work with this project.
All right. Thanks, Jonathan. So we see this project as a beginning, kind of setting the stage for us, and has really helped us identify future things that we need to think about. But I also encourage and ask folks in the Water and Planning Network. I think there's a really nice dovetail between these issues and what I presume is priorities for the network, and looking at the materials that we've talked about and that Bill and others have provided, that there's a real nice nexus here. So I encourage other folks to pick up a piece and think about it more. But so we want to better understand the possibilities of on-site reuse and affordable housing and housing in general. There are many paths for future work to develop these topics. Here's a few of the things that we have identified as future things that we want to look into. So documenting the long-term water savings in comparison to cost of reuse systems and affordable housing is very important. We need quantitative data. I know that the city of Austin is collecting specific data on dual plumbing and other, other things that go into these designs, but we need more of that. Some other examples are how much financial savings are passed on to the tenants and the property owners. What do these savings look like for different subsidized housing models? What would the cost be per unit? This is all really important to go into the cost benefit analysis. How can utilities effectively subsidize and incentivize their programs so that that on-site reuse can be used in affordable housing without messing up the delicate cost formula that they have? Who will operate these systems? What's there in place? That is another big issue. So as Jonathan mentioned, the long-term cost and the holistic cost benefit analysis, we need really detailed look at what that might look like, because in many communities, these projects can't even go forward or the requirements for these types of projects, like in Austin, for example, might not go forward if there's not a cost benefit that looks at the holistic look at, not just what it costs to build the affordable housing, but what are the long-term savings for the residents and property owners as well. That all needs to be incorporated because it's very important. And then another question is, what's the structure that will help support these technologies? For example, Austin has put in place an on-site reuse division within the Austin Water Utility in order to help not only affordable housing, but all developers that are looking at on-site reuse make those decisions and look at what's involved in that, looking at trainings, things like that. So this is kind of a whole new frontier. And we also think that future work should look into the land development codes as an opportunity to simultaneously expand wind water strategies and enhance affordable housing. And something that we didn't dive into in this report, but we heard a little bit about in our interviews, and we're going to be doing some work on this in a different project, but was the history of housing justice and how it ties to infrastructure racism. For example, the lack of capacity for water and sewer infrastructure in particular neighborhoods can have a lot of impact, whether it be flooding or limiting the construction of large multifamily affordable housing. So strategies like on-site reuse may help address the infrastructure issues of by making affordable housing possible in areas where the infrastructure could not previously handle it due to infrastructure issues. So this is a very, very discrete thing, but important, and something that we heard about in a couple of interviews. And so one of the projects that one of the projects that we're spearheading as a result of this work is we're developing a workshop along with the local affordable housing developer in Austin, where we are going to workshop how to integrate on-site reuse into future developments. We're going to bring in professionals, we're going to do some technical sessions, and then just do some like planning charrettes to really look at that. So that's one of the kind of things that are coming out of this work for us. So like I said, I'm really interested in the thoughts and feedback of our colleagues here that are online today listening. I think the Water and Planning Network is a really great place to be having these kinds of discussions. And we on our team, we are water planners and water, that's where we spend most of our time, and we're not affordable housing developers. And I know that is a very detailed specialty. So we really hope to learn from our other colleagues out there on some of the best strategies moving forward. But we think that there is a real opportunity to increase resilience and water affordability into the future by integrating these types of strategies, not only in market rate housing, but in affordable housing as well, as long as there's not any unintended consequences that reduces the amount of affordable housing that's available. And that's our presentation, and we're happy and look forward to any questions or discussion. And I think we have one more slide with our contact info, Liam, after this one. I forgot to ask you to advance the slides. All right, do we have it? Are there any questions, Liam?
We do actually do not have any questions at the moment. Maybe we want to give folks another couple minutes to type in any questions that they might have been thinking of during your presentation.
Sure.
Maybe while we're waiting, I could say a few words about your presentation, maybe ask a question or two. One thing I noticed during the discussion today was that it seemed that most of the on-site reuse options seem to focus on stormwater management, green roofs, stormwater management, green infrastructure. Are you seeing any examples of plumbing modifications inside units or other approaches to water reuse?
Yeah, that was definitely more rare. So I think like the gateway on-site reuse things that people are doing is rainwater harvesting, stormwater, capture and interception, and slowing that water down. In the climates that it works well, capturing some AC condensate, but those are really the most common applications that we're seeing. And then using that water for landscape irrigation and green space enhancement, which is, all really fine and wonderful applications of the technology. But as we know that there's definitely more that we can be doing. We have a building here in Austin, our local library, which I was about to say is new. It's not so new anymore, but 90% of the water that this 6-story building uses is from on-site water reuse. So 90% of the water used in the building and for the landscape outside of the building and the landscape is non-potable water. So that really reduces the pull on our potable water resources and the treatment cost and the transport by capturing AC condensate, which we are blessed with lots of that in Central Texas, depending on your perspective. And then rainwater, which we're not blessed with a lot of this summer. And then that particular building has a backup connection to our centralized reuse system in Austin.
Yeah, having visited that, it's a beautiful library facility. And it's great to hear that it embeds all those sustainable approaches. I know that at the American Planning Association, there are a number of divisions, and you've raised an interesting concept. There's a sustainable communities division at APA. There's also a housing division at APA, and there's an environment and natural resources division at APA. And one of the goals of our group, which is kind of a subsidiary group to all of them, is to begin to connect the dots. And you've raised the issue of us having a better understanding of the balance sheet and the specifications for affordable housing and how to bring these technologies forward. So coming out of this webinar, certainly I will start to make those connections and draw those lines a little more explicitly. I think that's a valuable idea.
Also, Bill, I think that's a wonderful idea, because one of the issues we run into in Austin is that the neighborhood housing, the department that's supposed to look at do the cost analysis, the affordability impact statement, the data is not there. So, you can look, does it cost more to build it with it or without it? But that gets you into a real kind of binary situation, which is, we know that it's a lot more complicated than that, because embedding these strategies in our built environment actually help blunt long-term utility costs, or should, we presume, but we don't have the data to show that empirically.
And not only the costs at present, but in many of the, at least in the Western states, there's issues of water availability. Just the simple addition of new demands on a water system may preclude a project from being built. And the Alliance for Water Efficiency has done some great work on NetBlue approaches to help manage addition of new water demands, but having that water demand from new affordable housing be as low footprint and low impact as possible would really help those projects move forward. It also occurs to me that in the cost benefit analysis that you had talked about, the federal government and lots of locations have some pretty explicit guidance about how to conduct benefit cost analysis. And the feds certainly include long-term O&M in their analysis, but their analysis typically doesn't go outside of sort of the project. So one of the questions becomes, if you're having more conservation or on-site reuse and you're reducing your water demand, does that benefit the local aquifer or lake or reservoir or water system in terms of treatment capacity? So there's all sorts of externalities to a cost benefit analysis that perhaps could be more explicitly included. So that occurs to me as another direction for possible action in the future.
We've hey Bill, sorry to interrupt. We've had a couple audience questions come in, so
great,
I'll,
perfect.
Go ahead and pose those to Jennifer now. Someone says, I heard you talk about the upfront costs. What's the effect on operating costs? Did that come up in any of the interviews?
Yeah, that's a great question. It didn't come up in the interviews like as a concern necessarily. It was more about, because the systems really are fairly simple. I mean, at least the ones I've seen and the ones that we were talking about, they're not as complicated as one would imagine. And so for the buildings that have an on-site person that manages them, because what we're talking about is large multifamily, you don't need a specialized like independent staff person to do that. What we've heard anecdotally is that often the water reuse systems are the ones that are the least problem of all the systems in the building. And, I'm way out of my like technical expertise. This is just what I've heard. And I know too that in Austin, one of the things in order to set people up for success that our community is planning on doing is having trainings and doing some certifications and other stuff to make that type of specialized training available to building operators. So yeah, it definitely has come up, but it hasn't been an overriding concern. And somebody please tell me if I'm wrong, because I do not operate buildings or reuse systems. I'm a water planner.
All right. Well, we have another question. Can you speak a little bit more about what OSN water systems that qualify for PACE loans? And on that note, is there a database of developments or redevelopments that have used PACE loans for water reuse?
Yes, so my understanding is that the PACE program, the Property Assessed Clean Energy Program, is available in lots of states. It's something that has to be adopted. Texas has a PACE program, and it's not available in every county, but is in a lot of counties. And the enabling legislation around it is a little different from state to state. So I'll say in Texas, PACE is a program where you can take out a loan to finance energy and water efficiency, which includes on-site reuse projects. And if you pair them with lots of energy efficiency and water, then they make really well. And what I say by make is that you have to demonstrate to the people that manage the PACE program that the cost savings from implementing the energy and water efficiency and reuse programs will be as much that you will save at least as much money on the utilities for those as you are spending monthly in your payments. So you basically, it's a wash, or else you come out ahead on the payments for that. So it can be for new developments as long as it's on a property that was previously developed. So we've been looking into this because this is a big thing, because you know, this is a lot harder to do when you're renovating a place, which is kind of how PACE has been traditionally operationalized in Texas. But you can have a place at a property that was previously developed, and then you're putting a new development on it, that will qualify. But I'll also say that's the thing that we're looking at trying to fix maybe during this legislative session in Texas, to allow previously undeveloped properties to be eligible for PACE. There are quite a few projects in Texas that have incorporated advanced water efficiency, but we don't have reuse examples yet, but they're working on that. And one of the reports that we put up, we actually did with the PACE Authority and with Austin Water, where we looked at several different building typologies and looked at whether or not on-site reuse would qualify for PACE. And it came out very well. So, you know, PACE is ready and willing to help move some of those through their process and get some proofs of concept in Texas. And like I said, it is a program that's available in other states, and the rules surrounding it may be a little different because, you know, everyone's legislature is certainly different.
All right, thanks,
Bill,
Jennifer.
do y'all use PACE? Do you encounter that in your work in other parts of the country?
I have not seen that program very extensively.
Okay.
I'm on the East Coast, so I'm less familiar with that than the HUD and the FEMA programs.
Okay.
We have one more question. Someone asks, have you found any private sources of funding to incentivize these practices?
We haven't really looked for those because those are hard to come by, and I presume they're hard to come by, and we want to put forth funding that is readily available to everyone as long as you can qualify. So we haven't really looked in that way yet.
I think that you raised an interesting topic before, which is the whole environmental justice and overburdened communities and redressing some of the past oversights and investment there. And there are a number of programs moving forward to try to provide funds to overburdened communities to improve structures, to improve utilities, to improve resilience. Now, of course, we always run headlong into the gentrification battle. And, you know, basically, whenever you improve anything, you make it attractive to more people, and that causes problems. But you cited some examples of community groups getting together and, you know, protecting their equity in their neighborhoods and communities. So that was valuable. But I'm seeing more groups being interested in helping to foster improvement in overburdened communities and to address environmental justice issues. And in the past, it's been hard enough to draw funds to just helping improve structures to meet code requirements. So you're taking it a little step further with this in terms of, you know, a warm water or water reuse perspective. And I think that's really important. But I think it in many ways, it's cutting edge in terms of where the subsidized housing, groups have gone in the past. So this is just, you know, amazing new ground that needs to be addressed, and I'm looking forward to coordinating with my APA colleagues and others to see how to move this ball forward.
Well, it's been really interesting to research it, and it was the simple question that we wanted to answer wasn't so simple and wasn't even really able to be answered by us with the budget and timing and knowledge that we had. So I'm glad about this work and kind of moving into this space. It's a little new for us, but it feels really right. It feels like, you know, if we're talking about future resilience and investment in our communities and everybody being able to participate in these things that we're putting in place that increase resilience and increase long-term affordability, then we need to, if possible, and if it doesn't run counter to the actual goal, be able to provide this in all parts of our community. And what I've heard from some is that, you know, these types of strategies are going in, but it's only in certain types of housing. And so, you know, our hypothesis was we really should try to make this available in as many types of housing as we can, and try to just take a close look at the issue, and finding people around the country that are trying to do these kinds of things was a challenge, but then also really great to be able to talk to them and get all the case studies together.
That sounds great.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Jennifer and Jonathan and Bill. We did have somebody ask if we'll post the links to the report, and that will be included in the PDF of the slides that we'll send out along with the recording in the next couple days. So be on the lookout for that. You can see on the closing slide where you can sign up for more news and updates from the Water and Planning Network, as well as more information from the Alliance for Water Efficiency. So hopefully, if you're not on those lists, you will go ahead and sign up. Any closing thoughts from anybody before we sign off?
I thought Jennifer's closing comments were excellent, and I'd prefer to leave it there unless she has more to add.
Count us in for any future projects or thinking about this. We're happy to participate.
Thank you.
All right, well, thank you so much. And if anybody has any questions they think of later on today or anytime in the future, you can feel free to go ahead and email me or email the speakers directly, and we'll make sure that those get answered for you. So thanks to everybody for joining us today. And thanks again to our speakers, and have a great day.
Thank you.